Welcome to SikhCast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
This episode is from a live webinar recording that originally aired on August 29th, 2020. Our webinar coordinator, Mohanbir Kaur, will get us started by introducing this episode's panelists.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. Kulvir Singh currently serves as the Executive Director at SikhRI, but also works with the innovation and growth strategy firm Clario, leading international projects with Fortune 500 clients. Kulvir has been actively involved in the Sikh Canadian community. He is the co-founder of the Seva Food Bank in Mississauga and the Toronto Sikh Retreat. He also serves on the boards of the William Osler Health System and the Empire Club of Canada. He lives with his family in Brampton, Ontario. Professor Mohanbir Singh Sawhney is a globally recognized scholar, teacher, consultant, and speaker in business innovation, modern marketing, and artificial intelligence applications in business. Professor Sawhney has written 7 management books, as well as dozens of influential articles in leading academic journals and managerial publications. He holds a PhD in marketing from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and a BTech in electrical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi. Please welcome our presenters.
Well, thank you for joining us. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Kulvir Singh. I was teed up in the introduction before, and I'm delighted to be with everyone today for this really intriguing conversation with Mohanbir Singh. And I'll start with a little anecdote about me and Mohanbir. Mohanbir, and I often have benefited from the Sikh halo effect, where whenever we walk into a room, we carry on we are beneficiaries of the legacy of any previous interactions that audience has had with Sikhs, or particularly with Sardar.
Positive or negative?
Yes, well, almost always positive in my case. But I also have been the beneficiary of the Mohanbir effect, because a lot of the work I do in the world of innovation, and actually in the Chicago area, puts me in contact with people who are know Mohanbir very well. And so they often in conversation will call me Mohanbir by accident, for which I always take as a compliment. But I've also been stopped on the streets of Chicago a few times from behind, saying, "Hey, Mohanbir," and I look around and they look aghast, and they say, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were my professor, my friend Mohanbir," and I always take that as a compliment. So delighted to have this conversation with you today, Mohanbir. Take a couple of minutes to kind of tee up the topic of why we're here, and then I'll pass it over to you to kind of hear your story and why this is such a relevant topic for us. So, the theme today is, we see inspiration and action, and I'd say inspiration to action. And it's about connecting 7 billion people in the world today to what we call oneness, or Ekon God, and how do we bring the Guru's wisdom to the world. And, because right now, the Guru's wisdom, and when we think of the Sikh diaspora, it seems to be, the 25, 30 million people that are born into Sikh families is where we've confined the Guru's message. But that's not always been the case. If we look at Sikhi and Sikhism through history, Punjab has always been our center of gravity, but Sikhs and the Sikh community have always transcended geography, caste, tribe, culture, language, ethnicity. If you think of Guru Nanak's travels, took him all over South Asia into the Middle East, and wherever he went, people of various backgrounds all became fans, followers of Nanak, and became Sikhs. If you look at Guru Amar Das, who established the Manji system all the way up to Afghanistan, what is present-day Afghanistan, and all the way east and south, those were individuals who were not Punjabi, but they became Sikh as well. And if you look at the most dynamic example I always found was the Panch Pyare of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. They came from all over South Asia, and they landed in Anandpur Sahib to answer the Guru's call. So the Sikhi has always been this in a way, a big tent tradition, a big tent lifestyle. It is not we are a race, but not one defined by ethnicity, but of values. And even our central thesis, our manifesto of the Guru Granth Sahib that we've given is not in Punjabi. It's in the Gurmukhi script designed by the Gurus, but it incorporates multiple language systems from all over and examples and analogies that are meant to be as diverse and as inclusive as possible. So we come from this legacy, but where we are today is that SikhRI is often overlapped and almost confused with Punjabi. You know, the culture and the faith have become so closely aligned that it's sometimes hard to separate those. But that assumption of overlap is actually tenuous at best, because we know that the Sikh diaspora has exploded in the last century. There are major Sikh populations that are now 4th, 5th generation removed from Punjab or South Asia, and Africa, in North America, in Europe, and now in Australia is booming. New Zealand has a thriving Sikh population. Singapore has had one for a very long time. Malaysia, and all those places, the languages that Sikhs are speaking are the language of the vernacular of the place where they are. They're also all speaking English, and then Punjabi is also into the mix there as well in the Gurmukhi script. So in all of that, there's this interplay that's happening around the world where our community, the Sikh community, is becoming global, and SikhRI is a legacy of global, has a global perspective. And then when we look at the world today, we talk about 7 billion people, but we're moving from 7 billion to 10 billion people. So the total addressable market in Mohanbir speak is actually getting bigger for us, for Guru Nanak's message. But these 7 billion people in the world today are facing a perfect storm of issues and challenges and things going on at an individual level and at a regional level and a global level that are, the word unprecedented has become almost overused now, because we talk about these perfect storms of, obviously the pandemic and COVID-19 and what that's done to the economy, what that's done to our society and our interactions. But you layer on that climate change, the slower pandemic of that. And then you layer on all of the social justice movements we have, from Black Lives Matter to Indigenous First Nations reconciliation in Canada, to reconciling with the caste system in India, and just general global inequality that we're facing in all different places. But on the flip side, we have this technology that's allowing us and hundreds of people on this call today to join and connect and engage in different ways. But we're all, I would say, anxious. We're all in a place right now where we're nervous, we're anxious, we're uncertain. And we're looking for some direction. We're looking for some, I'd say, inspiration, motivation, some true north to help us guide through this, some moral compass to give us a set of principles and guidelines in which we can decide what needs to be done for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our economy, our business, and for the world. And in all of that, what is the role that SikhRI has to play? What is the role that the Guru's message, what is the role that the Guru's lifestyle, their history, their case studies of what they did when they faced challenges and adversity, what did they do there? And what our way of life, what do we have to bring to the world? Because the Sikh community has been greatly influenced by external variables in good ways and in not so good ways. But how are we changing the world? What is going to be the Sikh contribution to the global narrative over the rest of the century, over this decade? We're in the 2020s and the rest of this year. So what is the role that our Guru Granth has to play in the inspiration of our Granth? And then what is the active role that a Guru Panth is going to be playing, our community that's going to be playing in that? So that's really the space that we're going to talk about together. We're going to talk at an individual level, at our community level, and then at a global level. And into this, we're going to tie in all of the experiences that Dr. Sawhney has from the corporate world, all of the trends he sees, the books he's written, all the different forces that play there, and how we can take advantage of those to really bring Guru's message to the world there. So with that, I'll tee up my first question to Virji, really telling me a little bit about your journey, of how you got to the point of being on a call with SikhRI and talking about this topic and this experience, and what you think you bring to it. And then most importantly, I want to know in all that how you're doing COVID-19 has not been kind to many of us, and I know you've gone through many personal challenges right now. But there's always the silver lining there. So I want you to talk about the silver lining in your world as well. So over to you to kick things off.
Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh, and welcome to all of you. And thank you, Kulvir Ji, for that wonderful backdrop and introduction. As was mentioned in the sort of introduction to me, I have been on the faculty at Northwestern University at the Kellogg School for almost 29 years. I, like many of the Sikh diaspora, came to the United States more than 30 years ago in search of opportunity, in search of higher education. Did my PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, and then have been at Kellogg since. And here I have sort of been at the intersection of technology and marketing and innovation, and have worked extensively with some of the larger technology companies as well as startups. So that's a little bit in terms of my sort of professional background. And as you can imagine, coming up to the present, education as we know it has been turned on its head. In fact, Kulvir, just yesterday, Northwestern announced another change, which is that all sophomores and freshmen are not going to be allowed on campus. This was as of yesterday. So wow. Things are so fluid, they're changing, and all fraternities are being shut down because they seem to not figure
Super
out
spreaders.
They don't know how not to party. So
yes.
So anyway, so it's a very fluid situation, and we have been affected by that too. So in a professional sense, it has been a challenging time. I was actually asked by our dean 3 months ago to lead in a new position, the Associate Dean for Digital Innovation at Kellogg, to kind of lead our response. So, we have pivoted, we've gone virtual, and actually we're finding that in virtual instruction, there are things that we could do that we couldn't do before. It turns out that live streaming is more inclusive because you can now see more interaction through chat, through virtual hand raising. So there are ways in which we can engage people. We can do breakouts with random people, so they get to meet people that they might not otherwise. Because in a class, you tend to sit together with people you know. You tend to team up with people you know. So interestingly, we're finding that it's a more inclusive environment. The technology is a great leveler, and of course, while you can't have that one-on-one social interaction, but we've done virtual office hours where we sort of engage one-on-one with students. I just hang out after the class when people come into the chat rooms and we chat. So I think it was actually our evaluations as a school, as a university, were higher in the spring quarter than they were last year for the same quarter. So. So that's sort of been the and similarly on the executive education front, we've done we've pivoted. I was just reminiscing the other day, a month ago, I did 3 keynote speeches to 3 continents in the same day without moving a leg, right? I was sitting in the same chair. So and I think I touched about 1,000 people that day. So it's an interesting time, and I think that this embodies a value that comes straight from Sikhi, and that is Chardi Kala, right? The keeping a positive attitude, sort of seeing, and in fact, I wrote an article about this some time back, but I said, a pandemic as opportunity. Yes. Let's not waste a good crisis. Let's think about how we can actually innovate, disrupt, and you and I both work in the innovation area. So we are now looking beyond COVID to say, the classroom will never be the same again. Teaching will never be the same again. So let's now see how we can blend the best of digital with the best of physical to create innovative learning experiences. So that's kind of been my professional journey up until this point. And as you mentioned, we've had personal challenges. As Kulvir, I lost my mother to COVID just about 10 days ago, which was, we're still sort of dealing with that loss. And it is a dangerous disease, especially for the elderly. So that's sort of the putting things in perspective. That's where that's my story up until this moment.
Well, thank you for sharing there. Maybe and again, my condolences to your mom, who I had a chance to meet just last year. I think when we did a session in Chicago there as well, and and you can see her influence over the entire Sawhney extended family there, and your involvement with the community there. So tell me a little bit about how, I bet you if you asked Mohanbir Sawhney, 30 years ago when he first landed in the US, and then, Kulvir Singh on my end, coming out of undergrad, that, here you are, we're going to be in a pandemic, and we're going to have you guys do a webinar on SikhRI, and talking about how to be ambassadors of the faith and speaking about this to the rest of the world. And you would have been, what do I know about this stuff? I was certainly completely ignorant. I'm like, I'm not a Gyani, I'm not a Granthi, I'm not a Kathavachik. I barely have the most elementary of handles on what it means to be a Sikh, but yet here we are. Tell me a little bit about your journey, whatever you're willing to share about how have you cultivated your relationship with the Guru? And then let me add the COVID angle to it. How is that hopefully that relationship has deepened during this time of isolation?
First of all, a disclaimer, I still know nothing. Keep
that attitude.
That is the spirit of being a Sikh, is that you're always a learner. And I really like how Satya Nadella at Microsoft puts it. He says we should have a beginner's mind, right? So every day we wake up and saying, the day you think that your cup is full, it will actually be empty. So if your cup is empty, it will always be full of new insights. That's one of my favorite Zen quotes. So when I landed up here in 1989, one of the interesting things is that one had never had to articulate, who are you? Right? Because you were living in India and people kind of knew what Sikhs were. So, Marshall McLuhan, the media critic, once said that I don't know who invented water, but it probably wasn't a fish. So when a fish is taken out of water, it is only then that it appreciates the true nature of water. So similarly, when I was put into this new situation where people looked at the turban and they looked at me and said, what is this thing and who are you? I had to perfect my 30-second and my 60-second and my 2-minute pitch.
Yep.
And for that, I had to actually ask myself, who am I? What does SikhRI mean to me? Because it's so this is sort of the very interesting thing is that when we were growing up, as all of us who are sort of first-generation immigrants, I will make a big distinction between what I call organized religion, faith, and culture. These are three different ways to experience the tradition that we grew up in, right? So when we were young, what was really at the forefront was the practice of organized religion. Mm-hmm. Going to Gurdwara, participating in langar, doing, all the part for karna and so on. So it was sort of and a lot of it was mandated, by our parents. And whenever parents mandate anything, Newton's third law, equal and opposite reaction, we run in the opposite direction. So I actually was fairly uninterested, frankly, because to me, that whole organized religion aspect didn't hold a lot of weight. It was not something I was doing voluntarily. It was not something I was really sort of engaged with. So I was strangely disassociated. So, but when I came to this country and I was forced to reflect, then I realized that my connection with the Guru, my connection with the Word, can also be a very personal connection. It doesn't have to be institutionalized, and in fact, that is the core message, that we don't actually have to go to Gurdwara to pray. You can have a personal connection, and you can pray at home. You can so in terms of my relationship with the Guru, with the Word, it has really sort of progressed from organized religion to what I'd say personal connection. Mm-hmm. It has progressed from words, reading the Word, to appreciating the meaning, and it has progressed from sort of preaching or being preached to really incorporating ideas into action. So I think it has been a very sort of, so now I reflect on much more the spirituality, the faith, the wisdom, as opposed to the trappings and the ritual. Now, of course, I still maintain my identity. I still will go to Gurdwara. I will still, but I think that sometimes we take these rituals as the truth. No, they're not. I said that one of my Zen favorite quotes is, don't confuse the finger pointing to the moon with the moon, right? So that is not the so I have since then made an effort to really incorporate and internalize the values. Just to give you a couple of examples of values. One is humility, right? So it's like, that home, or sort of the ego is the root of a lot of evil. Home dirag rog hai, right? So it's like so that is something that I tell myself every day, that you are not above anybody, you are not below anybody. Never forget where you came from, and never let this get to your head. All this, whether it is fame, fortune, respect, and so on, and this is all temporary. This is all an illusion. This is all Maya. So I think that really helps keep me grounded personally and professionally. So that's a simple example of how one can take a value like humility, and what our gurus always preach, that let's just think of yourself niche mein at niche, right? You don't want to be somewhere, and that really helps keep you grounded. So I think it has been over time much more of a internalization and a personalization, and I think that is something that all of us really can do. So translate values into action, translate the word into what it means to in your life. That's kind of what I've tried to do.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I've gone on a similar journey. My journey was a similar internal journey, but my journey was different. Being born in Canada, I was in that sticking out like a sore thumb from the day one. Right, I was always unique, and I've always had been questioned from day one on who are you, what is that, what is your identity, what does it mean? And I came up with the elevator pitch pretty quick. Very early in my life, I knew what to say. I knew the response to everything, but it wasn't necessarily what was internally felt by me. I just knew these are the things this is what a good Sikh would say when he is asked about these things. And what I discovered, my journey has been, I think, similar in the sense that the institutional religion, when it's left only to the external displays of religiosity, becomes very hollow over time, right? So you go through this stuff. But once you develop the internal connection with the guru, with the Bani, and it starts working its magic within you, and the values start coming alive in you, then all of a sudden going to a kirtan doesn't seem like a chore. It seems like a blessing, right? Going and doing seva doesn't seem like work. It seems like it really becomes an act of selfless service. It becomes an act of seva. And so I think the journey that, and we both have kids, I've been trying to do with my kids is less about, yes, we attach them to the Gurdwara, we attach them to the institution, but let them not be in their 20s and 30s before they start realizing that the roots of Sikhi are the connection to the Guru itself. Right? Absolutely. So you mentioned, that you kind of had to go away from the institutions to do this. I want to, Dr. Harbans Lal, who I know you well in Dallas, come up with a blog article a couple of weeks ago talking about how COVID is decimating organized religion. Because organized religion is kind of based on the monopolization of sacred spaces, that at a physical level, but also at an intermediary level, right? That you have to go to a certain place and you have to have a certain person pray for you in order to receive any kind of blessing or any kind of divine connection. And now all of that's been taken away because people have the tools at their disposal. Every religious text in the world, every sermon in the world is on your screen, and you can mobilize yourself. And I have seen an explosion of online sangat happening. And I can see this, my kids right now are on a camp. There's a camp going on, a Gurma camp going on, and they wouldn't have been able to go there in person, but they're learning online and they're taking that away. And I know there's Gurbani discussions happening online there. There's all the tools that you're using to teach digital marketing online are actually now becoming tools for people to develop a deeper connection with their own faith and maybe to actually explore beyond that. So I don't know, have you been seeing that in your world as well? And how the connection there?
No, absolutely. I think that what we are fortunate in Sikhi is that we never had intermediaries, right? We never gave the priesthood any divine rights. It was so our connection is direct, our connection is personal, and it is a very democratized notion. So for us, whenever you gather in the name, that is where the sacred space is. So in a sense, we have just had to rediscover what is already part of our tradition. So I have seen that indeed, and in a way that has actually made this connection deeper, because when you every Sunday you can go to Gurdwara and go through the motions. You can go through the motions and you can check a box somewhere saying that I've done my bit, I've been religious for this week, and
Sunday
I've gone to church, ho gaya, but now it's a little bit like you have to be intrinsically motivated as opposed to extrinsically motivated, and it is something that you do for yourself. And by the way, we need more of that, right? We need, because this is a very stressful time. And while we are all very most of the people on this call are fortunate, we have jobs and we have, we are healthy, but there are people struggling, and it is really a very uncertain time. So at that time, it is at these times that you need faith, that you need an anchor, you need a North Star, so you need guidance. So that is, I think, been a very comforting. And of course, with the personal challenges I've gone through, it is also, one sort of goes back to the source. And, it is like this, that I think of Sikhi as this like infinite well. Our scripture is an infinite well. You can go to it and drink, and you can go and drink as deep as you want, as much as you want. And so one just keeps going back to the well and try to go deeper and deeper. And, that is something that has been accelerated because we now don't have the opportunity or the excuse to kind of just go through the motions.
Go through the motions there. Yeah, in a way, we've lost that. That was a nice cover for us, right? We could check the box and be a Sunday Sikh. Now, we'll talk in a minute here about, Sikhi, our gurus were always giving us the inspiration to transform our inner reality so we could transform the world. And there's a role that we need to be playing in this COVID world of how we're supporting those who are less fortunate. And we do that. We'll get to that in a second here. But I want to talk, maybe get you to draw some connections back between your world and what we're talking about here is that I think many, and I've had, and I'm speaking from experience here, where I've had many conversations with friends who I didn't think were particularly religious per se, who are now finding the space in their life where there's something missing, and they're trying to connect with Sikhi. And, pre-COVID, they would have just started going to Gurdwara and maybe stumbled their way through something. Maybe it would have been a great Kathavachik that day or a particular shabd that they were able to understand, and they would have maybe been able to find the link. But in this world right now where we're on with screens and people are learning, all sorts of somewhat useful things like baking and sourdough bread making. Others are acquiring, learning critical, learning musical instruments. And I don't know who these people are that have all this time, because it hasn't been, it's not you or me, but people have been able to, take courses online, take things online that are, and also find communities online of practice around these things that they can support each other and gamify things and stuff. What is, and I'll say this, what do we have? And then more importantly, what's missing right now in our community, in our repertoire of maybe digital tools and capital, online capital of things that are making it tough. We're not talking about 7 billion people, but even tough for the 30 billion people that we are now to really be able to help themselves to this nectar of knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. And I'll for a minute speak like a marketing professor and talk about sort of what are the barriers to adoption. This is, if you think of Sikhi and the scripture and its wisdom as an innovation, why is this innovation not diffused even, first within our community, but then to the, concentric circles of people that we could influence beyond our community. So I think that there are a few things that come to mind. One is language. So language is a constraint, and if we had, for instance, done this webinar in Punjabi, its reach would have been, we would have been preaching to the converted, so to speak. So it is I think it is a realization that we have to be open about, that if you want to attract the younger audiences, if you want to attract the what I'd call the less interested or less committed audiences, you have to speak their language. You literally, and I mean it literally. And I think that this is also reflective of the Granth Sahib, that it was written in the languages of the day,
of the people,
the people, right? It was, and that was the problem that that we faced with the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism, that since nobody spoke Sanskrit, since Sanskrit is a dead language, you then had this whole set of middlemen as interpreters. So, so I think that that our Guru showed us the way by saying, whether it is Braj or whether it is Pali or whether it is Farsi, whatever the language of the day is, speak in that language. And similarly, today we have to say, let's not get too hard, too ritualistic about ke Gurmukhi ch nahi hai, so we're not going to talk. We need to make Sikhi user friendly, right? So use a technology analogy, we are like Unix, or an IBM mainframe, phenomenal technology, but we need to be like Apple. We need to kind of improve the usability and ease of use so that we can get the message out. So that's I think one. And I think that the other thing is that we have to take full advantage of the medium, of the technology, and that is why I am a strong supporter of SikhRI and the work that it does, because we are using the platform to create content in different form factors, different for different persona and different journeys, so that whether it is the young or whether it is the elderly or whether it's by age group or stage in life, or in fact I've also thought that maybe we should be segmenting by by need, by job to be done, to use a technical term, that if I am depressed, or if I am have a substance abuse problem, or if I have marital problems, and how do we connect the wisdom, because the wisdom is universe. There's enough wisdom in the scripture that we have to serve all of our life's condition, but making that, surfacing it and making it connect it more closely with people and their concerns is I think a gap that we need to continue to work on. Because I was joking with Kulvir that when we were preparing for this webinar, that Sikhi may be the best kept secret on the planet. So the message has to, but the message cannot go broader beyond our community, unless we understand it ourselves. It's a water only flows from a higher level to a lower level. So we need to sort of be informed first. We need to absorb first, and once you absorb, only then you can transmit.
Yeah. So a couple of great points there you picked up on. I think if I look at it right now using your language, we're not a very customizable platform yet, right? It's one size fits all. It's the Henry Ford. You can have any color you want as long as it's black. You go to the Gurdwara and you get the experience that you get, and whatever's there on the main stage is there. And Gurdwaras are run by a certain demographic, a certain gender, a certain age, and the content is usually most relevant to them by definition. And everybody else kind of gets snippets of what things they like. My good friends here in Toronto are part of they invited me to their church. They're Christian, and they invited me to this very open, inclusive church that they do and they take over these auditoriums. It's like a convention center that they take over almost. And they walk in there, and the family splits up. The kids, they have a different room for every age, up to grade 1, 2, 3, up, and then they have a room for teenagers, and then they have a room for young adults, and then there's the main room where the grown-ups are. And the content, this is their Divan, their Sunday morning program, is completely age appropriate in that, and the material that they share and stuff is all done in that way. And I think what you're talking about is, I think Sikhi is universal, but the application of it needs to be for individual needs, because the depression one, you talk about that as a use case. I may need that at one point, but the other one is actually, I need motivation and inspiration. I need another one is like, how do I take things to the next level? I have ambition, and how does Sikhi give me the ambition to change the world? and at different stages of our journey, I know you've done this. We've done this a couple times within SikhRI. It's like mapping the experience from awareness to transformation.
Right.
So this and our I think our challenges right now is everything is made for everyone, which means it's not for anybody. So maybe speak a little bit to how do we get better at that? How do we get and I think you alluded to this, is that we actually need more people generating the content who are connected themselves, because if you're only having a certain people being the messengers, then everything, if only Shakespeare writes, all you're listening to is reading is Shakespeare then. Yeah. So how do we broaden the tent in terms of the articulation of these experiences for more use cases, I'd say?
Yeah, I think, by the way, as you were speaking, one thought that occurred to me is that we're talking about a segmentation problem, right? And that one size fits all versus customization. But again, if we really go back to our gurus, what is the hukum? What is the wah? It is actually personalization. Jo prab ko milbo chahe khoj shabad mile, right? It is literally that we are told that if you have faith, you will open the book and it will speak to you personally for that situation, that context. And it does, if you do have faith, right? So I guess they understood the concept not only of segmentation, but mass customization, segment of one.
Mass customization, right?
Yeah, segment of one. So, and that segment of one is also not, as you said, that today I might be looking for inspiration. Tomorrow it might be I'm dealing with an adverse situation. So the word speaks to us, right? So, but I think that the point you made is an important one in terms of getting the message across. People respond more to people like themselves. Birds of a feather flock together. So if we want to reach a diverse audience, we need to have diverse people. So, so I like to say that if you want to have diverse conversations, you have to have diverse voices, right? So, so that is something that we have to think about. And this may be, for example, one thing I can think about is different walks of life, right? So maybe it's a physician, maybe it's an artist, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's an academic, maybe it's, a social worker. So how these values and these messages manifest themselves for different people in different walks of life, different stages in their lives. So I think that that would be of great benefit, because it's very important for people to have role models. Similarly, if I'm a high school student, I don't want to listen to some Uncle G or Auntie G giving me gyan because, they're like, you guys don't get it. But if it's another peer, and this is why I really like the Sidak concept, because you're in a community of peers. So we need to think about how we can create these peer groups, how we can create more diverse voices, because it's almost like it's one message, but it has to be communicated in many languages and many contexts for many audiences. And we have to just broaden and make more diverse the set of people who we are using as ambassadors, as spokespeople, and we have to be much more inclusive in recruiting those voices, as opposed to some sort of you have to have served for 10 years on some board somewhere, Gurdwara or some cultural society to be able to. So I think the sort of the man of the street or the woman on the street persona, who's and I think the other thing we can do is to really play up the fantastic work that is being done in service and in relief, whether it is the Khalsa aid or whether it is just disaster response. And even in COVID times, I think one of the messages that have gotten a fair bit of press and PR is the Gurdwaras and in the Sikh community is how they've been helping out with feeding people with langar, whether both in India and in the United States. So so those things we take community for granted, we take sangat for granted, we take langar for granted, we take seva for granted. But it's actually a great story. It's a great story to be told.
It is. It's our natural competitive advantage, right? You'll say, right? So to transition over, I think what I'm hearing from you is we really if we want to try to take a Guru's message to attempt to take it to 7 billion people and a much broader, much more diverse set of audiences, we have to actually then curate a very diverse set of ambassadors. And what we need to do is take that message and come up with the personas, as you say, is that, and I think this is the hard work our generation needs to do, is as we establish ourselves in different careers, different walks of life, as artists, as the doctors, the lawyers, but the engineers, but the activists, in all the different places there, is really interpreting the Sikh experience for that space, right? I have friends who are doing social work, and they're treating trauma through a Sikh lens, and treating addictions through a Sikh lens, addressing mental health through a Sikh lens, addressing, all these things there. And I think, so that's, in a way, building the knowledge base, the repository of talking points, of the curriculum that we can then actually take out to the world. Because I think right now, my opening tee up is, what is SikhRI going to offer to the world around Black Lives Matter, around global inequality as a response to capitalism? Well, to be honest, I don't think any of us really have thought a lot about that and haven't really been able to articulate that. We don't have, scholars, or we don't have intellectuals. We don't as many activists who've done that hard work. But as we do that, I think what you're saying is that really then puts us in a position to be spokespeople for that Guru's perspective.
Again, that Black Lives Matter is a recent slogan, but go back to scripture. Allah nur upaya kudrat ke sab bande. Ek nur te sab jag upjaya ko bhale ko mande. I mean, the message of universality, the message of see all men and women the same, see all faiths as the same. We have these jewels that we've been sitting on, and they've been sitting in a locker. So we just need to first understand the wealth that we actually have. Yep. And then be in a position to actually translate it into the languages and the context that will connect with people.
That's right. Absolutely. So now let's transition over, and I see lots of comments and questions coming in. So we'll I think we're kind of getting to the end of our arc, Virji, and then we can take some of the questions from the audience there. So you referred to what has been part of our DNA from day one, around this sense of service, that we see no difference between the creator and the creation. And in fact, we see the spark of the divine in all of creation. So for us, that's why Seva and Simran are in the same breath. An hour of contemplation of the divine and an hour of service of the creation are one and the same for us. And so this sense of giving back, and not just helping others, but bringing others to a state of self-reliance. So our job is not to keep giving people food, but to help them get them back on their feet. So we're safety nets for society, but we're also springboards for society. And I think those roles have really been highlighted, as you said, during this period. And I've been very pleased with, I don't think there's a country where their Sikhs are where the Gurdwaras have not mobilized and local communities are not mobilized to serve the needs of the newly unemployed. So many people are beset, as you said, with the problems of COVID, and we're just starting to come to grips, I think, with the economic toil that this is going to have on our societies. But we know the Sikh communities have scaled up to at least feed people today and tell those stories. The question I have for you is right now, those are great anecdotes, and how do we take those, in putting your marketing hat back on, how do we take those to really be the tip of the sparrow that, you love that, come and learn about why we do what we do, right? Come and learn the source, right? You've seen that's kind of the trailer for the Sikhi, but come and learn about the source behind it. But then also on this humanitarian stuff, right now, I'll say these are great, but they're all kind of still bandage solutions. There's still one-off. There's no, Khalsa Aid is becoming one of the big, few global organizations we have there. But, a community of 30 million. I look at any other tradition like that, they'd be standing up dozens of these international organizations focused on the stuff there. So maybe speak first about how we take advantage of this moment and the spotlight that we're getting to maybe spin into formalization and more institutionalization in a good way of our efforts for scale and acceleration.
So, Kulvir, I wrote a book about 5-6 years ago, and it was called Fewer, Bigger, Bolder. And the argument that we made in that book was that when you try to do a lot, you actually accomplish very little. So you have to sort of really focus on fewer, bolder initiatives. And I think that that may be one piece of advice I have, from a community standpoint, that let us not try to be the sun to give everybody a warm glow, but let's try to be a laser beam that even with a little bit of energy can really burn a hole. It's about focus. So maybe we pick up a couple of themes. Maybe it's domestic violence, or maybe it's equality, or maybe it's mental health. We need to sort of put our more wood behind fewer arrows. And just like Khalsa Aid is to disaster relief, what can we be to maybe women's rights, or what can we be to marriage equality, or what so we have to really kind of sharpen our focus on a couple of themes, and then put an organization behind it and get people from those walks of life behind it. So that, I think, would be a more focused way of thinking about seva and about community and about getting the message out. So maybe if we try a couple of these initiatives in a more focused way, that would be because when you are few, you can't take everything head on. I mean, this was also true of the Sikh warriors, right? They always fought a guerrilla war. They never went. They always did judo. They didn't do sumo. We don't go head to head. So we can't wrestle all the world's problems to the ground. What we need to do is to really pick a couple of themes that I think are urgent, that may that resonate, and then put our energies behind those to make a meaningful impact.
Absolutely. And I think the two that come to mind are the ones, in a way, we've talked about. The first is food. For us, and this is our culture, our DNA, and maybe the Punjabi side of us. There's always more than enough food to go around. In our history, we've been able to. And I say, and this ties to the second one around fighting for equality and human rights, is that we may not, how do we show allyship with our other communities, right? Because we don't know the Black experience or the Indigenous experience, or the communities, but yet we're empathetic to them, and we want to stand in solidarity. And I saw a great example here of the youth here over the last few years, where these protests have happened. They've gone to these protests, but not empty-handed. They go with samosas and cha, and they feed the movements. They feed the communities. And so I think there's this I think, and that I'm a part of the Seva Food Bank, and we've been able to do so much change in our local communities around that. And I come back to that. I think food is an easy one for us. Food is not going to.
In basketball terms, it's a layup. It's something that
slam dunk.
and always, Sikhs and Punjabis can't be removed too far from food anyway. So it is very authentic. It's something that and it's I think one area where we have touched communities beyond us in a very meaningful and a significant and impactful way. So that's certainly an area. And I think absolutely the other thing, domain is equality. Sort of the all lives matter. Whether they be Black or brown, but but it's really striving for that message, but in a targeted way, sort of bringing something to that conversation, and not just. Of course, you need to be joining the protests, and you need to be part of that, as my children are. They're doing, but adding something to that conversation, to that discourse.
Well, and then I think that's the larger narrative here, right? Is that how do we add? So I think we can add something ideologically from the Guru's message of equality. But also practically around mobilizing to fight hunger and fight the battle and feed the troops fight on their stomachs, as they say, right? So how do we provide that to them? So fantastic. If you're okay with this, I would love to maybe pick up some of the questions here from the audience here, and then we can close things out. So this has been fantastic. So some of these may go back to some of our other pieces there. So Sukhjot had from Toronto. Sukhjot Kaur had a question around the benefit of non-Punjabis coming into the Sikh, and I'm going to take a little bit of liberty with this, is that the Punjabi culture has a lot of gifts associated with it, but there's a bit of a legacy to it as well. And think of caste system and gender stereotypes and stuff, but people coming in fresh, and we've seen this with some of the Caucasian Sikhs coming into. What's what's the benefit of, and maybe the challenge of people coming in, non-Punjabis coming into the faith right now, and how can we support them in their journey?
Yeah, I think that it really enriches the community because when they come with a different. So remember we were talking about culture, faith, and organized religion as sort of three different legs of a stool. So they approach faith, but they come from a very different cultural experience, and I think that enriches the community because in some sense they don't have the baggage that we might have. So it is I think absolutely in our interest to welcome people with open arms because their experience, it's sort of like we're all converging on the same message, but we're coming at it from different cultural experiences. And I think that is just I see it primarily, I see it as an asset. And I think that what we have to do as a community is not be judgmental.
Very much.
That's something that I find sometimes people say, oh gee, langar, zameen te nahi beh ke khande. Oh, why are they, singing shabads in English and that accent theek nahi hai ji. I think just that is very much against what the gurus had told.
Well, I've been reading a lot of the anti-racism sentiments there, the books, and I think our own biases come to the forefront here when others from other communities, on one level, say we invite all to, the gurus. Langar is open to everyone, and then, but it's also welcome to everyone without judgment. And
it's like my son was in Argentina for 6 months, doing some semester abroad, and he went to. He actually found the Gurdwara there in Buenos Aires, and he would go there, and he said everything is done in Spanish, right? And they have enchiladas and whatever, and empanadas for langar. So. And it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing that I'm actually far more concerned about when people try to. The thing that I don't that I'm against is people becoming gurus, right? So that the so-called sort of
the Baba scenario,
the sants and the mahants and all that. That to me, so you can bastardize the cultural experience, no problem, because that's enriching. But you don't bastardize the spiritual, the message, and that is something that needs to be guard against.
Yeah, someone said to me is that there's this 10% of the Sikh experience that is divine, that is perfect, that is directly descended from the gurus, and then there's all these things that the other 90% is what Sikhs of the time have done in response to the situation. Right. And those responses have changed over time. And I think what we've done is we've taken that 90% and locked it in with the 10%.
Correct.
And we have not adapted to the time that we're in. And so things have to be done a certain way. And why do we do it? Well, because we've always done it. Well, we actually haven't always done it. We just have always done that for the last period of time. And it was always dependent on the situation.
And the important thing is that 10%, by the way, which should be 90%, is timeless. That message, from 550 years ago to now, its relevance will never change because it's the universal truth. But the cultural interpretation of, how we practice our day-to-day lives, that has to change with the times. And in fact, if we don't change that, we become irrelevant. So the right balance between timeliness and timelessness is something that we need to strive for.
We have to do that, and then we still have the khalsa, we still have the identity, we have all the rituals that come from the gurus, and so how do we keep those? But I agree that how do we adapt to the times that are there? Somebody had a question of how can we make, and maybe this is you spoke a little bit about this in your experience in the classroom. How can he says, can cyber sangat be as strong and personal as a face-to-face sangat in spiritual development? So we know that's nothing is as important. You and me sitting in a room there's nothing close to that. But maybe speak a little bit about what you've done in your experiences, classroom or otherwise, to make it much more personable, and how we can help out there with people who are trying to find sangat online.
Yeah, I think that they're complementary. There are things that you can do in a digital way, in a sense that you cannot do in person. For example, small group discussions, communities, or like what would we call like the breakout rooms, or the fact that you can there is no limitation of geography. This is one other thing we're finding, that many of our programs can now be global because we don't have to worry about people having to travel. So So we take the benefit of that, and but we need to adapt. Cyber Sangat, can't be done for 3 hours. It has to be done probably in bite-sized pieces. Probably the attention span is about as long as this webinar and no longer. But even that is a stretch. So I think we have to adapt to the medium. What we should not do is to apply old thinking to a new medium. We have to apply new thinking to a new medium. But hopefully, once COVID passes, it is not all about cyber. As we're finding in the classroom, we're going to sort of incorporate both these ideas and bring them together in a whole that is richer. So maybe part of our Sunday school that we do for the kids can still be done online, so that if they can't come to the Gurdwara a particular week, they can still get exposure to that. But on the other hand, I think that the concept of people in the same physical space communing, and that is what the word Sangat is there's something rich about that. Right now, those physical communal experiences are happening inside our homes, but we return back. So I think we need to take the best of both, and combine it into a synergistic whole. This is what we're doing in the classroom, and I think this is what we need to do with our own experience.
Well, a very simple one that we've done in our government school here in Mississauga is that when we went virtual, we were able to bring in guest speakers who would have never been able to fly all the way up to Toronto to talk to a bunch of young people, but yet they could all take an hour out to be on a Zoom call and have this experience with them. So I think you're right there. I think it is realizing that there's a gift to this virtual that we need to, and it's really the mirroring, the bringing the two together when we're able to at that point in time. So good. Question from Deepinder Bhatia, who I think was used to be great to run into you in the halls of Steinberg, Dietrich, while you were PhD student.
It's been Wharton.
Yes, he says, thank you. Yeah, Wharton, 92. He says, thank you, SikhRI, for this beautiful talk. Question for you. As a open-minded intellectual that you are, do you feel that any one religion is necessarily the right way over time for an individual to connect with the Almighty Creator? In your own case, are there multiple threads of different religions that are filtering into your personal philosophy as you evolve in your own search and connection with the Creator?
So, I'm not fully qualified to answer that question. All I can say is that that if the Ganges is flowing in your backyard, your duty is to first drink from it before you explore other rivers. So we have such a rich tradition, rich spiritual wisdom, and I'd say also perhaps in the scheme of world religions, the most contemporary. If you read the Dasam Granth, and if you read Guru Gobind Singh Ji's the Chitra Natak, I say he had the benefit of hindsight. So he talked about all that came before. So in some sense, the Sikh tradition and spirituality has the benefit of looking at all traditions past, and in some sense, synthesizing and building on top. So I have not found the need to go elsewhere. And in fact, I would be sort of delinquent in my duty if I didn't first mind my backyard, before I explored elsewhere. So, so I think that what the gurus teach us is that all religions point in the same direction. So there is no inferior, no superior, this is different things by different names. But I think you have grown up with a particular way to experience the divine, a particular way to connect with. So why not, go along with that? I think that certainly our tradition is no inferior. I wouldn't say it's superior. I just say it's different. But it's good enough for me, and more than good enough for me, and that's what I'm sticking to.
Absolutely
into it.
and absolutely, and it does not exclude us from inspiration from anywhere. You traveled even more than I did. Some of the most inspiring spiritual conversations we've ever had have been on airplanes, sitting next to somebody who had never heard of a Sikh before, and yet we learn more from that person than we would in other cases. So, and
there are resonances that you find, and I think you should continue to find. It's when we were doing the Antim Ardas for my mother 2 weeks ago. So the Shabad we sang was Jyoti Jyotirali, Jal ka Jal hua Ram. So it means the light has merged with the light. And I was just reflecting, what they say in the Bible: ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Yes.
Right. It's the same idea. Jal ka jal hu aram. Right. So it is really the so time and again I will be talking to a Jewish friend, or I'll be talking to a Muslim friend, or I'll be talking to or be a Hindu friend. I'm like, wait, this is the same thing. But what we agree upon are the truths. What we disagree on are the untruths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether your temple needs to be built here or there. I mean, those are not truths.
Interesting. So another question we have from just the initials here, KS, and I'll summarize it. It was around, we talk about that the need to speak the vernacular, the language of the day, especially to reach young people, right? So outside of Punjab in India, Hindi and English have to be there. Here it's English, and South America it's going to be Spanish and everything. But
right.
but there still is. I can translate Shakespeare into any language in the world, but at the end of the day, if I want to truly experience Shakespeare, I have to come back to the base language there. So maybe speak a little bit about how do we plant the seeds for those who are outside of the Punjabi, experience or the traditional Sikh world. That how could we think about that? That we, because translations are actually interpretations, and everyone has their own. But at the end of the day, you have to come back to the source material, right? Because a derivation of a derivation is going to take us to different places. So how can we, how have you seen ways that that people can do that, and what's the balance look like, and how, where in the adoption curve do you kind of bring them into the fully authentic experience?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll give you a couple of examples there. That my wife is Hindu, but she has become very interested in the in the faith, the scripture, and since she writes and speaks Hindi, she's actually picked up Gurmukhi, and she actually does the part, and she is able to read. So I think a little bit of effort. If you have some background in any Indian language, you can do that. But I think where we have failed dismally, and I will say really failed dismally, not only as Sikhs but as Punjabis, is there is no good place to learn Punjabi. There's no great place to learn Gurmukhi. I mean, there is even Google fails us, right? So it's like so my son is going through that experience right now. He's like, I gave up. He says, where do I find non-judgmental language instruction? Because my son speaks 6 languages, but Hindi and Punjabi is not one of them yet. I mean, he's now, I think he's looking at it. And why? Because whenever he would try to speak, people would laugh at him. So he says, I'm better off speaking Spanish. He speaks Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, Arabic, because nobody's judging him. So we should stop judging folks in our homes.
Totally.
And tell your aunties and uncles and your grandparents that, don't correct. Galat bol rahe hain, say, encourage them.
Totally.
Encourage them. It's like when you go to a foreign country, if you speak a few sentences of Spanish in Mexico, they love you for it, and they don't tell you that's the wrong accent.
Somebody does that with a Punjabi. Somebody just says SikhRI to us, and we invite them to our home. But when our own children struggle with the language, we judge them. And
we judge them, and we laugh at them, and we
have spaces for young children. But one of the beautiful examples, and it was short-lived, was one of the government schools here started a parents' Punjabi class. While the kids were learning Punjabi, they actually recognized that many people have never had a chance, didn't grow up in a home where Punjabi was spoken during their early years. So now they're parenting and they're trying to connect their kids with the language, but they themselves don't have the skills right now. Right. And it was a wonderful conversational space that was created to do that, and people loved it and it thrived. And the thing with language is you don't have to. Yes, you can take a university course. We can create Duolingos. But those that speak it, again, part of the ambassadorial role we all have, I think is a way to make it easier for others to come into the tent as well. I think is a big part of what you're saying as well. Good. Just a time check. Our wonderful host, I don't want to get kicked out here, but Manvinder, how are we doing for time, and are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah, we still have about 25 minutes if we'd like to continue. Doing some questions.
Okay. I thought we were. Time flies when you have. I thought it goes the other way. So let me pop through a couple of other questions here. So I guess maybe this is one where this is a tough one, because we all struggle with this, and I have a friend who's going through this right now around identity. And I got her call from a dear friend from Delhi. just this week, and his 20-year-old raised the question that is, the cuts to the heart of any Sikh father around keeping of the hair, keeping of the beard and the dastar, the turban, right? And so he called me in that moment of crisis, because his 19, 20-year-old at that time is going through that now. Why do I need to keep this? Why can't I just be, don't I just need Sikhi on the inside, not the outside and stuff? So as we, I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but as we think about from, the Sikh community to 7 billion, the identity is certainly not something, the identity falls in the 10%, right? It's not, the identity is not in the 90%. But how do we, not from a place of guilt or fear or mandating, but how do we make the identity as a badge of pride, honor, love, that you wear it with, you wear it with such a sense of joy, that you relish the opportunity for somebody to ask you about it, to be identified as a Sadat? How do we, it's like, how do we make them as very vocal, visible advocates and love with their affiliation with this, as opposed to seeing it as a burden and responsibility? So maybe from a bit of a marketing angle, but also, obviously you have a son as well, so a personal angle as well.
Yeah, so I'll respond to this sort of in a more serious sort of spiritual way, but then I'll respond to it in a marketing way, in a more flippant way. Right? So in a more serious note, I think that identity is an outcome of belief, not a manifestation. So what I mean by that is that faith and belief comes first, and then you develop a pride in identity. But if identity is imposed without sort of that connection, without that sort of affiliation or identification, then it becomes like you have to learn how to play the tabla, or you have to know how to do part. So it becomes a rebellion. So my personal take on it, and I have 2 children, and by the way, they are mixed race, because my ex-wife is Christian, and they have embraced the identity. I say that as parents, maybe we keep them long enough in the identity that where they have maybe till they're 10 or 12
that they can backfill the faith in.
Yeah, and because it's easy to leave, it's not easy to come back. But then have them sort of discover and experience the faith themselves. So now my children are advocates for identity, but so I think one of the things you have to realize as a parent is you don't have control over your children, right? So this is what Khalil Gibran also told us: your children are not your children, so you only have the illusion of control. All you can do is to put them on the path, and they will be seeker, they will be Sikhs, right? So that's so I think that is the way I look at it. And if you lose that battle, so be it, because it's not something that you want to impose, or you want to, it's really. And I have seen, by the way, children, and I've seen people come back.
Of course,
come back once they, so there's always that. Now on the marketing front, folks, wearing this turban is a huge competitive advantage. I have always seen identity as a source of strength, as people don't forget me, people remember me, and it is always, it's not always easy. Listen, it's not always easy, because you do stand out. But on balance, standing out to me has always been a source of strength, a source of competitive advantage. I mean, when I do a lot of public speaking for a living. In public speaking, people may have 8 speakers, that speak, but they'll remember the guy with the turban. So I think that it is, I have now lived, worked in the United States for 30 years. I have consulted for dozens of Fortune 500 companies. I have spoken all around the world. And I've always felt that that the identity has been a source of strength for me. So I think that is from a marketing standpoint. One of the things we teach is positioning and differentiation. And our gurus had figured this out, 300 some years ago, that you will never be able to blend into a crowd. That's what Guru Gobind Singh Ji said to us, right? I will never let you hide. And actually, when if you don't hide, be proud of who you are. So I wear it as a badge of honor, as a source of strength. And yes, there is the occasional discrimination. There's the occasional, more born out of ignorance than out of hate and bigotry. Of course, there are hate crimes, and I'm not trying to minimize that. But I think that is a minority. In most cases, it is still a source of strength. But you have to realize it as such. It has to come from. It's funny thing is, identity is what is seen on the outside, but it really comes from the inside out. If it is imposed from the outside, you're going to fight back. You're going to resist.
You made me chuckle because it was the very first of your talks I heard. I think almost 15 years ago was at an event where you spoke about the marketing genius of Guru Gobind Singh in terms of identity, creating the Sikh identity and the form that people spend billions of dollars trying to differentiate their product in the marketplace, but yet the Sikhs don't spend a penny, and yet we stick out in a crowd of millions there. The other you're talking about this blossoming of identity is somebody explained the identity, the roop to me as it's the fruit on the tree. It's the beautiful apple, the beautiful shiny apple on the tree. And the tree will only produce the beautiful apple if it has a robust root system, leaves, branches. It's getting enough sunlight. It's getting enough water. It's getting all the other things get right to produce that apple. And there may be an apple on it now, but if the roots are drying out and the leaves are turning yellow and all those things are happening over time, the apple's going to fall, and the external is going to fall apart there. And I think there's a couple of questions there around people coming into the faith, sometimes get enamored with the identity. And I think a lot of our culture, Sikh culture, is focused on the identity, and we hear this in our own communities and our families. As though that's this kind of veneer that can paint over all the other deficiencies in the person there. And I think where we have seen people who end up giving up, casting aside the hair or the visible identity, is in almost every case, it's because the roots, the connection to Barney, the connection to the Gurant, the connection to the community had not gone deep enough to really keep the fruit alive. And I think when people come back, they don't come back, start wearing a turban right away. They actually develop the roots. They develop a connection with the Guru, and then slowly, over time, I think then the fruits, it bears fruit after that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that is also, I think, a very important word of warning that you don't tell how good a Sikh somebody is by looking at technical compliance with the 5Ks. That you're 80%, 60%. These are symbols, and I think symbolism is important. I'm not minimizing that, but I totally agree with your comment. Just because you're wearing a turban doesn't make you a better Sikh. It's your practice.
I have a Chicago Bulls jersey. If I put that on, no one's going to confuse me for Michael Jordan, right?
Michael Jordan, yeah.
Exactly there. Good. A bit of a pivot here right now, and I want to maybe take this in a different direction. There's a question around, we talked about that this world of 7 billion there's so much trauma and anxiety and angst in the world about things that are happening right now. But also every human being, and this has in some way over the course of their life experienced trauma. And that could be trauma, that was done, sometimes it's abuse that was done to them. Sometimes it's trauma that they've gone through themselves, maybe tough decisions, or now in retrospect, difficult or wrong decisions that they made based on what they were, what they had, but they're in this position where they're dealing with a lot of, there's a great deal to heal in their life. And Bonnie can be a malam on that. But maybe I have a couple of thoughts that I can start with, but I would love to hear your thoughts on how, maybe in your own life or where you've seen the magic of Sikhi work as Miravad Guru Govinda. We talk about this how can Sikhi be healing in that space? If you have any experience in that, or thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I think that trauma and adversity is part of our lives. It's very much sort of the yin and yang of existence, and we when you go through those down periods, and when I just went through it personally, right, just a couple of weeks ago, was one example of that. But you go through divorce, you go through illness, you go through bereavement, you go through economic loss, unemployment, job loss, and so on. So I think that what I'll just be very personal here in my experience, that I derive solace from, in those circumstances, have done so, from the realization that this too shall pass. That that everything we see around us is temporary. It's really sort of that it is not a something that will persist past a certain point in time, or even past this life. So that is one way in which sort of I personally have tried to get past things in the realization that if there is darkness, there will be a sunrise tomorrow, and that is sort of what we learn. Jagarachana aisi bhai jo balu ki bheet. Things are. It's like sand dunes. It's like it's like jalte upje budbuda. So. So it's like, so the Nave Malle ke shlok actually are, to me, one of the most comforting at times of adversity. I read it, and it is, you just have to read the Nave Malle ke shlok to realize that,
the impermanence of life.
And we're focusing on the wrong things. We're worrying about the wrong things. As long as we sort of stay true north, we should be okay. And I think that the other thing, frankly, is just contemplation, right? So contemplation. So those three things, thal vittin vastu pe sat santok vichar. So, as long as you sort of anchor yourself to sat santok and vichar, contemplation, just, so sometimes when you're very disturbed, I go into the Babaji's room and just sit there. Silent contemplation. That's it. Or read from. So I think it's a very sort of personal, sort of spiritual experience that one has to go through, but then overarching on top of this is the concept of Chardi Kala, that eternal optimism, the ever-rising spirit, which I think gets you through a lot of the downturns, because you're like, that you cannot lose spirit. You cannot lose, even though you may be going through adversity. So that's the way I personally had to,
Yeah, no, it's fantastic you've said that. I think we often confuse the purpose of Sikhi as a pathway to material success and pain, physical, and avoidance of physical pain and suffering, right? Our ardas is always, Vaheguru Ji, please give us more of this and less of this, as opposed to saying, Vaheguru, let me accept what is and have the strength to respond in Chardi Kala, right? So we always are trying to, I often think we're usually not trying to accept hukum. We're always trying to tweak hukum, right? As a young kid, I'm always trying to tweak hukum. Can I get a little bit more marks so I can get into med school? Or can I get this job or this placement? Or can you change the world so that girl looks at me instead of the other way? Or can I get the car, the promotion? And then also, can that disease not take over so-and-so's life? Can my relative conquer the bacteria versus the bacteria conquering my mother, right? And all these things we're always trying to change the score.
Well, and we also do it only in times of need, right? So it's like we become spiritual and religious only when death is at our door, or we're going through a crisis. So it's
or the night before a final exam.
Night before suddenly become religious. I mean, there's a metaphor that, and by the way, we also become more and more religious as we become older and death is knocking at our door. So there was a very nice analogy that I like, is like, let's say you're going to a temple and you were presenting flowers. So would you take a garland that was shriveled dead flowers, or would you take
Yeah.
fresh, fragrant flowers? So why don't we offer ourselves to the Guru when our body is still fresh and fragrant, as opposed to shriveled up?
Hold on,
He's knocking on your door. He's like, I got to catch up on my brownie points here. So
Yes.
by the way, better late than never. But I think
that transactional relationship
than now.
Yeah. I think I think one of our journeys is moving beyond this transactional relationship that we have with an Ekonkar that we see as blessing some, smiting some, and that I need to get into his. Usually, good books. If we think of Ekonkar as something that's this one force, this one energy, it changes our dynamic around that, and what will be in the universe will be. And our ardas is always one of having the strength to accept it and then move on with that. The other point I can quickly make on the point that was raised around, for trauma and people going through abuse, and how do you bounce back? How does a Gurbani go in there? And a shabd that I actually used as a translation, and somebody who was in the group was a social worker who had never connected the dots, was Mantu Jot Swarup hai apna mool pashan. That, oh, my mind, recognize that divine spark of the universe is actually within you. So for us as Sikhs, this is one where it's such a amazing concept that we come from perfection. We come from Ekonkar. We come from the divine. So we come from a point not of sin, but a point of that we come from everything is perfect within us. So that no matter what we do in life or what is done to us, we have a chance of going back to that perfection. If we are able to introspect, if we're able to go within and connect with Vaheguru, that infinite potential lies within every single one of us. And so Sikhi is, how can that not be of Chardhi Kala? When it's a story of eternal opportunities for redemption. And Nome Pasha this slok, some people take it saying, you're at your last legs, why don't you do it? And people take it in a negative light. I always say it as, it doesn't matter what you've done up until this point. Doesn't matter what happened maybe in a previous life. Doesn't matter what you did up to today. But what are you going to do in this moment?
And I think, the other realization that's really important is sort of the concept of free will, right? That you actually have the opportunity. And in fact, even right in the November Shlok, they said, Bal hova bandhan chute, sab kuch ho to paye. It is all within your control. You can break the bonds. It is really sort of, you have the strength. It is within you. So there is a concept of free will, and that is you are given the opportunity, but you have also an obligation and a duty to move in that direction, to move towards the light, and to move towards to be learning and to be sort of improving in a continued progression, because that is what we are taught, that our body is merely a sort of a vessel for the soul, because as it is progressing. It is progressing in its path to the union.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm just going to look at some of the questions here. I think there's quite a few questions here around young people and teenagers, and I think I've often seen this when I look at my own kids who are a little bit younger. They're not teenagers yet, but I look at their lifestyle. I look at what they do and what they're interested in. The movies they watch, the games they play, the food they eat. Increasingly, there is the difference between what their lifestyle and a mainstream North American lifestyle. The gap is becoming less and less. And of course, they still keep their hair. We still are bringing Sikh lifestyle into the home and stuff. But in terms of their viewpoints on life, are actually not that different. And so I've often thought about that if we can connect this next generation of young people coming up, if we're able to get them across the line, with their limited knowledge of Punjabi, their limited knowledge of the Sikh experience, their limited time within the Sikh world, because there's so much in the mainstream, that actually is a bridge, or that is a bridge to the mainstream, or vice versa. Getting to the mainstream will certainly bring our children along for that journey as well. So any thoughts, reflections on that demographic there of, in the marketing world, teenagers are the hardest to get to, right? Young people are the most elusive demographic, but we talk a little bit about finding people like yourself, but what are other ways that we as a community can be making ourselves relevant to that phase of life or that segment?
So Kulvirji, I remember this was many years ago. I met a very senior executive from the entertainment industry, and she was doing the SpongeBob and those shows. What is the? I mean, this is not Disney, but this is the. I'm forgetting the other companies. So I was asking her. I said, how is it that these shows you have, Blue's Clues and SpongeBob, why are they so much more engaging than even Disney? So you know what she did? She just stood down and looked at me like this. She said, this is what we do. Disney does this. We do this, right? We come down and we look eye to eye with the 6-year-old. We have child psychologists who really are, we're speaking peer to peer. I think that is what we have to do. So often when we speak to children, we talk down to them. We talk, we assume that age confers upon us some sense of superiority, moral superiority, or superiority in knowledge or experience. But I think that is a myth. That is really sort of so. So if we embrace that humility, and also we try to, I'm not saying dumb things down, but what I'm trying to do is make them more approachable from how children will experience this, and maybe sort of topics or themes, dealing with teenage crises or dealing with relationships, so themes that might resonate with them. And it's the same thing I was telling you earlier, that you have to speak in their language. So speaking in their language sometimes is not, I'll narrate an example. I was sitting in a meeting and we were with a Fortune 500 company, and we were talking about their digital marketing strategy. And they were, so I looked around the room and I started laughing. They said, "What's so funny?" I said, "I'm the youngest guy in this room. We're all 60-year-olds here talking about digital marketing strategy. What do we know about it?" I said, "Where are the kids? Where are the 20-year-olds? Well, they said, well, they're not senior enough to be in this, strategy discussion." So I said, "Since when did your digital IQ become correlated with your age? In fact, it's negatively correlated with it." So that's the idea here too, that how do we come to, and by the way, I think peer role models are a very, very important aspect of reaching the teenagers, but it's also sort of being relevant to them. Relevant not only in terms of content, in terms of topics and themes, but relevant in terms of form factor. This is the Snapchat generation. This is the TikTok generation. This is not people who will actually, frankly, even attend webinars like this and sit for 90 minutes in one place. And God alone knows they're now having to do that 8 hours a day for their school anyway. So we really have to think creatively about, the content, the form factors, and the role models, the messengers, the ambassadors. And I think that being a test case is more generally what we need to do if we want to broaden the message beyond our community. It's the same idea, right?
Wonderful.
That the message, the medium, and the spokespeople all have to be tailored.
Absolutely.
Want to reach out to.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it remind me of
the chamber. We're just speaking to ourselves, which is important. But as we've noticed in politics, you're not changing anybody's mind.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think the something that both of us have spent time on is user-centered design. And I think right now we need to look at the different users that we have, especially the young people, and reimagine what a Sikh experience. What does a Divan look like for them? What is Kirtan? What is Gurbani? What is Santya? What does Katha look like for them? What does Langar look like for them, so that they are getting the benefit out of it, rather than just taking what we have and putting a twist on it for them? So absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Sawhney, Mohanbir. I'm going to pass it over to Manvinder I think she may have a question if we have time. Otherwise, she can move over to closing.
Thank you. Yes, I just have my one wrap-up question. Thank you to the both of you for this conversation. I'd like to conclude this conversation today with a question to the both of you. Understanding and engaging through this conversation as a millennial, so maybe not a Snapchat or TikTok generation, maybe I'm more Facebook and Instagram, but I think something members of my generation and those who are tuning into this conversation, a very engaged audience, I might say, a conversation that is happening revolves around this constant pressure to be productive and busy. And I appreciate both of you sharing your moments of struggle and how you both engaged with those, particularly through a Sikh lens. But moving to what you give your time to, you are both quite busy, yet you're quite involved with SikhRI. So what is it about perhaps this organization that motivates you to give your time and resources. Professor Sawhney, perhaps we'll start with you. A quick concluding note.
Thank you for that question. I think that whenever somebody tells me I'm busy, I said, it's just a matter of you haven't prioritized. There is always time. It's just where you choose to focus your attention and your time. And I think sometimes we tend to not think hard enough about what our priorities are. So in that context, I think the reason that I try to help out with SikhRI wherever and whenever I'm asked in my limited capacity, it is because I think they're filling a very, very important gap. And that important gap is to have an intellectual, a balanced, and a researched perspective on not only the Shabad, but also the applicability of Sikh values to everyday lives. So I think, and doing it in a language that people understand. So I think this is very, very important work. And that is why I choose to, give because there's a huge gap in getting this message out. So SikhRI is a platform that is filling this very, very important gap.
Thank you. On my end, SikhRI is an organization who I have continued to grow with in my own journey and as part of my seva, and is starting to actually become synonymous with my own Sikhi. That I have gained so much in terms of my own knowledge and understanding and experience with the Guru, that SikhRI has provided a platform for that. I'll say what I love about SikhRI is, and I've said the story many times to those who know me, is I semi-forced one of my cousins to go to a SikhRI event a few years back in British Columbia. And he went along, but he'd gone through different camps and different things, and he was, of course, Sikh, but had never really engaged. And he came back and he said to me simply, he goes, Kulvir, I've been to lots of different Sikh events where they keep telling you what to think. This was the first time I came to a Sikh event and they spent their time thinking about how to think as a Sikh. And I think that's what SikhRI provides. SikhRI doesn't provide the answers, doesn't give you the do's and don'ts of everything. But what SikhRI allows us to do is pick up the tools and build our own toolkit for our own engagement with the Guru, and then the application of that Gurmat into our day-to-day lives. So that I can pick up the newspaper and see the issues of the day of the world and have a semblance of a Sikh perspective on those. Or when I am in dilemmas in the workplace or with my family in different situations, that Sikhi now becomes a touchstone for me on how I think about a situation, how I react to a situation, and how I act in it. So SikhRI has become a very valuable source for me in my own journey in that way. And I think what we've done over the course of this year with our pivots, just like Mohanbir, to the online world, the COVID world, of providing these tools in an online space, these webinars we do, the videos we put out there, I think have just made hopefully our message and our work accessible to, in a order of magnitude more people that have otherwise experienced it. So thank you for asking that question, Manvinder. It's always good to end on a note of the sponsor of the event.
Amazing. Thank you. I think we've had this conversation before, so I think this how to think versus what to think was particularly important for me too in my journey with Sikhi. Thank you for joining in today. Today's webinar will be ending now. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you for listening to this webinar. You can look at upcoming webinars on our website at SikhRI.org. And while you're there, please consider becoming a donor. It's with the help from our audiences that the team at SikhRI is able to continue exploring Sikh knowledge and illuminating the voices in the community. Or consider becoming a supporter of the Sikhcast by clicking on support on our anchor.fm page, or you can use the link in this episode's description. However, this podcast is free to all. So if you do like the show, tell some of your friends and family about us.
You were listening to SikhCast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.